Good afternoon, everybody. We today have with us Sri Girish Kasaravalli, renowned filmmaker. I don't think he needs an elaborate introduction. He is a regular at IFFK, not just as a delegate, but mostly as his films in either in competition or in selection, official selection. And he's a favorite of regular IFFK audience here. Interestingly, this year he is also the chairman of the international jury of IFFK, the jury which decides the key awards of the festival in the international competition section. He chairs the jury. Thank you, Girish, for agreeing to come to this session and
Thank you, Shaji.
talk to us for some time. You know the format. We will have a chat and then also take questions if the audience has some. As I said, he is a product of FTA, and his films has traveled to all over the world. He was honored with a special section in Rotterdam Film Festival, and please tell us, we are eager to know, please tell us what influences you had in the earlier career and or whatever led you to decide that film is my medium, visuals are my medium. We heard about K.V. Subbanna's influence and all that. So it would be interesting to know that.
Well, basically I'm a science graduate. I did my bachelor in pharmacy from College of Pharmacy, Manipal. And since I am from a small village in the Sahyadri belt of Karnataka, I had no access to films or theatre or anything like that. But we were all surprised when one of the leading writers of Kannada, K.V. Subbanna, who also happens to be a relative of mine, went to FTIA to attend a film appreciation course. And when he came back, he told us cinema is a very, very important art form. That's when I got curious, because we are not exposed to cinema at all. I had seen few mythological films dubbed into Kannada, Telugu mythologicals that are dubbed into Kannada. So I was a bit curious because my exposure to arts is through literature, Kannada literature. I had seen great writing of novels of Shivaram Karant and the rest of Anantamurthy and others. I was wondering how can cinema be compared to those works. But later I got so fascinated by that. After that I passed out from this one and joined Indian Drugs and Pharmaceutical Company in Hyderabad. That is where I got opportunity to watch major works. I saw few films of Satyajit Ray. I saw some of the works of FFC backed films. Bom Chom, Sara Akash, Manikal's film. And that's when I thought, it's true. What Subbanna said is true. Cinema has a great potential. And even then I didn't think I would get into cinema because I wanted to go back to the college and do M pharmacy and get into drugs and but it so happened I saw an advertisement from FTA. I applied and I got selected, and then I never looked back. In fact, my interest in cinema, my initiation into art and aesthetics of cinema all began in FTA. Till then I hadn't seen cinema at all, and I never took cinema seriously till that time.
Okay, that's quite interesting because many often say that, they have watched so many films, they are inspired by masters and film masters, and then they go to the FTA, and you are introduced to the film craft and aesthetics at FTA. And who are your teachers? You had a chance to meet the legends there, or
Yeah, in fact, I think it's the case with most of the art schools. You don't get much from the teachers as such, but you get from the ambience. There are your seniors, there are your colleagues, and then you also interact with the professors, and that's how you imbibe knowledge. In fact, the first thing, the major thing I noticed was I am from a science discipline where everything is very strict. You know, water can only be H2O and nothing else. But when I joined FTI, Professor Satish Bahadur was teaching us film analysis. First thing shocked me was, Professor Bahadur told us that there is nothing called right or wrong in this one. You tell me why you think it's a good film. You tell me why you think it's a bad film. You have to give me analytical perspective of the film. And that is something, which which is not taught in outside, art schools. So that's one discipline I learned in FTI. Yes, right. We had Professor Satish Bar in the film appreciation, and Dr. Bhaskar Chandavarkar for music, and very interesting, very perceptive. This one in the other technical departments, in the sound, in cinematography, in editing.
do you think that a formal training is a prerequisite, or it will just supplement your?
You see, to become a filmmaker or to become an artist, one has to have some kind of this one within oneself. Otherwise, he won't be able to. These things cannot be taught, but they can be harnessed. A film school or an art school, what does it do? It makes the student realize his or her potential. See, I never, for me, the film school was very, very essential because I was never exposed to cinema. And my understanding of cinema was some kind of, through literature. I thought, a good film is one that is based on a good literature. At FTI, I learned cinema has its own idioms, its own, aesthetics and things like that, philosophy. And that way, it's very essential for a film student to get his skills, toned by a kind of a clear. See what happens if one is working in the industry, he gets all the skills. But what he gets is only the skills, not the philosophy of the skills. But in the art schools, what they do is they tell you the philosophy of the camera, philosophy of sound, philosophy of editing. So nobody in the industry thinks in those lines because they will be busy with directing the film. They don't have time to teach the assistants what is the art of cinema. That way, going to a film school is great advantage.
And that said, most of your films, as you said, we're talking about literature. About most of your films are based on either short stories or novels, right from the beginning. First film, it's Kadasadra itself. So, is there any particular reason, or just that you're fascinated by the stories?
Yeah, all my films are based on literary works from Kannada literature.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of a interaction between two medium, literature and cinema. In fact, when I take a story for adaptation, I never remain faithful to the original. It only gives me the foundation or the base. I build my own structure on that base. So in fact, there are quite a few films which has nothing to do with the original, but still I have given credit to the original writer because while I read that short story or the novel, this idea of making a film cropped up. So that's the reason why. It's true, I have made 15 films so far. 14 are based on Kannada literary works. Only one is my own script.
And also, Girish started his debut film was a landmark in Indian film history, Khadasradha. It was based on work by late U.R. Anandamurthy. And last film, you made a documentary about Anandamurthy. The Khadasadra also won the Best Film Award. Then this documentary on Anandamurthy too won the National Award. So was he a great influence on you? I mean, his thinking. I'm not just asking about basing the film on his literature, but
Anandamurthy as such had a great influence on Kannada writers, artists, social thinkers, because he was not only a writer, he was a public intellectual. In fact, he had interacted with people from all classes of life, from all fields of life, and that is one of the reasons why people did go to Anandamurthy for sorting out or understanding their own milieu better. In fact, I had done only one film based on Anandamurthy short story, that is Ghadashraddha. I was planning to do my next film, the second film, again based on a short story by Anandamurthy, but it was very complex, and many people told me not to take up that story because that could, thank you very much, that could jeopardize my cinematic career as such. So I haven't done it, but I am still on the documentary on Anandamurthy, I have a glimpse of that film. But I am still hoping one day I will be able to make that into a film, turn that into a film. There is a short story by Anandamurthy called Prashne, the quest.
Okay. And Khadasradha was dealt with a very serious subject. At that time itself, very kind of out of the box thinking was there. It's a story. It's a film about Brahmin widow and death of her husband. Then after her husband's death, how exploring her sexuality and all kinds of things were touched by the film. Do you think what was the response during that time? Because
the film was quite well received. It ran quite well, and audience reaction was also very good. But certain sections of certain people from certain caste, they opposed the film. They held protest and all that. For two reasons. Earlier to my film, Pattabhiram Reddy had made another film, which is also one Samskara, again based on a novel by Dr. U.R. Anandamurthy. Again, it won the top award at the Indian film competition. That was also about Brahmin orthodoxy. I also had done a film on Brahmin orthodoxy. So people belonging to one section, they opposed that film. But it was very small, this one, and it died down soon because audience response was very good, and even people who protested liked the film. So that's the end of it, you see.
Why I asked this question was like during, not in the same year, maybe a few years back, before your film was made in Kerala. Is MT Vasudevan Nair made his directing debut as Nirmalyam. So he had that film also had a very critical climax thing, like where is the priest spitting at the gods, this thing. He was recently quoted saying that if it was made at this time or this period, it would have been difficult for him to retain that, or he would have find it difficult. do you think so? I mean, if Kadasrada was made in these times, was it even possible? Or
Not just Gata Shraddha, I think of the 50 films that I have made, I would have found it difficult to make at least 10 to 12 films. Things have changed drastically, What is that notion of being a critical insider, of looking at myself in a very critical, this one is, has slowly eroded. We either want to praise or you want to condemn. What we don't see is there is truth in between these two. That is something which we need to understand, We are neither condemning anyone, we are not eulogizing anyone, we are trying to make the whole thing, we are trying to see how, what is the impact of any development or anything like that. So it's something what is known as neither total acceptance, not total rejection, but looking at it from both the sides so that to understand situation from a different perspective. In the cultural context, it's called as problematizing. It's not total acceptance. You say, yes, you are right, that's correct, but then here is a problem. Even when I made a film like Dvipa, so I'm not against development, but I do not totally endorse development either. We need to understand. See, what happens, when you support a certain this one, you are speaking from the perspective of the people who are getting benefited by it. But we also need to look at all these situations from the perspective of people who suffer because of these things. So then only we get this balanced perspective. A serious filmmaker, a committed filmmaker would always like to look at it from a kind of a perspective which is not the perspective of the dominant class or the class of the society. He would like to look at it from the perspective of the affected people.
you think that, as a filmmaker, you need not go with the, go with the flow, go with the tide. You have a responsibility to listen to the, the minorities. I mean, minority within the broad sense.
Of course, when I make films, and I keep telling this very often, that I want to give voice to the voiceless people, which is a very cliche, I know. But then when you say voiceless people, they are the people who are belong to a minority section, who are subjugated or who are marginalized. Their views, their sufferings are not heard, seen. So here is a medium where you can, those things can be foregrounded. That's what my attempt all these years.
But you never became a, propaganda films. You haven't made any propaganda film, but instead, you were more bothered with the nuanced. Your films had a more of a nuanced look at the state of things.
In fact, a serious filmmaker makes films which cannot be used as a propaganda material for any part,
Yeah.
Either this side of the fence or that side of the fence. Because he doesn't say everything is fine or everything is wrong. He would try to, see what are the strength of these issues, what are the weaknesses of these issues.
And as you're saying, many of the your films dealt with issues related to caste hierarchies, caste tensions, caste relations. Of course, ours is a society, which is very, caste is embedded in everything. And now you see there is a lot of, in many parts of the country, in many languages of India, many filmmakers are emerging with a strong voice and they are taking a stand on, these Dalit issues, and they are taking it as an identity, even to the level of identity politics, especially people like, Paranjit in Tamil and Nagaraj, Manjula is there, then many people are there, even in Hindi, other languages, films are coming out. So how do you think? I mean, do you think it as a welcome change or like?
See, what happened was, what was the situation earlier was the film was in the hands of one section of the society.
Exactly.
But today it has percolated down, and in one sense it has democratized the new technology, new kinds of filmmaking, and people from all sections of society are able to make films. And they are not only able to make films, they are also able to voice their feelings, which was not the case earlier. Even earlier, people from other section of the society would make films, but to suit the demand requirement of the majority of the people. Today, it is not the case. That's a very heartening change. Any filmmaker, any individual who has something very strong to say, he can mobilize funds, he can mobilize people, he can mobilize resources, he can mobilize talents, and yet make a kind of a present his own personal perspective. That is, the new technology has made it easy and possible, and that's one thing which is really, which I am great in awe of.
I was about to come to this point because, especially since you have touched it, this increased access to the medium, the technique, the technology, all this is the digital has changed beyond recognition the kind of access people are able to make, and there is a flood of youngsters to the medium. As you said, it has opened doors to a large section of this thing. So, do you think what's the status in Kannada and other? What's your experience? There is a big number of people coming out. I mean, young, yes, see, especially since, as you also said, you are one of the pillars of new wave film movement in India. But that time also, it has dealt with lots of issues: man-woman relationships, urban poverty, rural issues. Everything was touched upon, but except caste. I don't think caste was a major concern of the earlier new wave. So that is being addressed now.
But in Kannada,
Earlier itself.
new cinema
Mostly
of 70s, they dealt the issue of
Issue of
caste very strongly. So much so that one Bengali critic said even some of the major Indian filmmakers started looking at caste relations in a political perspective after films like, these films appeared in Kannada, Samskara, Chomanadudi, and my own films and things like that. But earlier some films addressed this issue, but they addressed in issue from a patronizing tone, saying that castes are dangerous. Like we have a lot of films that are being made during nationalist movement, but all the films were made part of the nationalist movement. Their ideal situation were their aim. But later what happened? They started looking at it from a very analytical perspective. And Kannada film's contribution is that. We looked at, especially post Samskara, we looked at caste relation from a very analytical perspective.
Yes.
And that was because majority of the Kannada intellectuals of that time, creative artists of that time, writers, poets, playwrights, and filmmakers were all socialists, Lohiites. So because they were Lohiites, and because Lohia said the biggest, this one for Indian system is the caste, they started understanding things from that perspective. But later, of course, people from various other political perspective also started making films and bringing a new perspective.
Yeah, I think you had a major point there because Lohit influence in Karnataka, people like Ramakrishna Hegde you had, and Anandamurthy was a vice chancellor, very
Yes.
widely respected vice chancellor in Kerala. He was very popular in Kerala even. So that made a difference to the films of the New Wave movement in Kannada.
Yeah.
That was not to be seen in, that was
In
not the
other
same
language.
case in other, even in Bengali films, which was
Correct.
widely this thing. Okay, let's come to this you have often cited Ray as your major influence, and we know his position in Indian cinema. How do you, has, though it's a cliche question, how
See,
Ray affecting the 70s filmmakers?
in fact, amongst the Indian filmmakers, I said I like Ray a lot. But there are other filmmakers who have inspired, I won't say the term, use the term influenced, but I'll say inspired me to go into various aspects of filmmaking. They are all from other places, but I am more inclined to admire films from Europe, Asian countries, India, and not from America. Somehow, for some reason, I was not greatly I won't say influenced, but I am not even aware, initiated into American cinema at all. So my inspirations come from Asian, Latin American, and the European filmmakers.
As we were discussing, Indian films often, this music is very central to the storytelling of most of the mainstream films in India. But not many on the parallel stream didn't follow it up that way. They didn't give much of a place in. And in the West, it's often, as we were some of the meetings, it was why they are, the West is often wondering why there is so much music in Indian films. How do you view that? Because as
Well,
your take is
West would like to give a template for the rest of the world to make films to suit their taste. If say for example, if Indians want to use music, why shouldn't they? I keep this question often. If Japanese filmmakers wants to use exaggerated acting, why should you restrict that? Aren't we trying to monopolize one kind of filmmaking? Aren't we trying to say this is the template for the rest of the world? See, there is a very interesting Latin American filmmaker called Spinoza who has said, I do not want to follow the pattern set by Hollywood, because that means we are accepting their hegemony. If they are adamant to say that we make perfect film, I say to hell with it, I make other kind of film. So we have to have that kind of a self-respect, each filmmaker. See, what has happened is, because of the various festival recognition and the global market, people are trying to make one template. But that, I think, is making the global cinema flat and one kind
Exactly,
of filmmaking. Yeah?
exactly.
Exactly. So what has happened? Look at the films of 1950s and 40s. Kurosawa, Japanese filmmakers, Kurosawa, Ozu, Mizoguchi, Oshima, they had a distinct stamp of a Japanese. I'm not talking about the superficial things. Japanese aesthetic concerns. Indian filmmakers had their own concerns. Chinese filmmakers had their own concerns, aesthetic concerns. But that is being flattened out now. I'm a bit worried about it. Though these filmmakers get world recognition, they get worldwide acclaim, awards, monetary benefits. But I also have to ask this question, aren't we simply becoming a cage in the wheel? Shouldn't we ask this question?
Because India, especially India, has a huge tradition of storytelling, village folk groups, and all that. So the music plays a big role there.
I was telling other day to a friend, in India you have a songs for puja, you have a songs for marriage, you have a songs for celebration, school days. We also have a song for death ceremony, death ceremony. So each and every stage we have songs. If somebody wants to use it, how can you say don't use that? I may not like to, you may not like to use it, but that doesn't mean, what that path that I tread is the right path. Give them the option. Look at their perspective. Let us look at their philosophy. Let us look at their politics and perspective, not at these idioms. What is happening? The other thing is, unfortunately, the idioms, they are trying to give us the uniform idiom. Don't cut too often. Don't use music. Don't let them act. And we are following it. That is a kind of a politics which is not acceptable to me.
The same point came while we were discussing about co-productions and things like that. So they also tried to, impose a kind of, there was so concerns that, there is a tendency to, fix times, this be the film, let this be the format, that kind of a thing. So co-productions that way is a very tricky business. Like, have you ever done co-production or your films are
I have never opted for any co-production because I know, I've listened to some of the world-class filmmakers
who has gone for
who have to bow down their artistic sensibilities so that it becomes a kind of a, accepted by for the co-producers. I'm somewhat against that.
and also this emergence of OTT platforms, that's another interesting, like this earlier digital thing. Now this OTT is like, it claims to bring so many stuff into, so many opportunities to the small time filmmakers or the parallel filmmakers. But in fact, they are also building a kind of hierarchy, a different kind of hierarchy. Instead of the theaters, the OTT platforms create a different kind of a star hierarchy, and they pick and choose films from that. Excuse me? Not here, outside. Sorry. What is your experience, and how do you observe this phenomenon of, like, OTT? It's a huge buzzword around that. People are making films exclusively for OTT, original films for OTT. So how do you see that?
I was of the opinion that the OTT is going to open up possibilities for serious filmmakers. But unfortunately, that hasn't happened. On the contrary, OTTs, they are working like the distributors of the erstwhile cinema system. They are going to tell you what to include, what not to include. That's why you can watch some of the ingredients right through the film, right in all films. In fact, way back in the 80s, the student of FTI, we had an opportunity to meet Nagisa Oshima. We asked him why in all his films there are certain elements. He said that is imposed on us by the industry. A man like Oshima is saying that it is, imposed by the society. But look at it, that varied from nation to nation. Japan had one kind of system, India had another kind of system, Sweden had another kind of system. But today, even that variation has been wiped out totally. So we are looking at a kind of a globalized, sanitized viewership. That's the pathetic situation.
So in fact, this global opportunity bring in kind of a monotony kind of thing, like
certainly, yeah.
Which
in fact, there is one writer, African writer, who is there, who is seen in all your WhatsApp groups, and she says, single narrative is always dangerous. But what we are trying to create is single narrative. But when we say single narrative, now we have to question this. Who decides what is that narrative?
Narrative, yes. That's very
That is
important.
not decided by me or not decided by you, that it is decided by somebody who is sitting somewhere, is invisible.
Also, you were talking about this Kannada tradition of, long tradition of socialites, thinkers, and they also doubles up as, writers, theatre activists, and then filmmakers. And with such a tradition, and now sadly we see the murder of Gauri Langesh and, many that kind of atrocity. So, how do you view this deteriorated, cultural space in?
If you look at Kannada political sphere, that spirit eroded in 80s and 90s. That socialist spirit eroded, Gandhian spirit eroded. And you can see the change now.
Yes.
And a kind of I have said in this one, so we always believed in a kind of a debate wherein I am putting forward my argument and you are putting your argument, and we both know that truth is somewhere in between. So why I present my argument is to extract your perspective so that we both can meet somewhere. It's a kind of a negotiation between two trends of thinking that we have even in our ancient dialogue. They always called Vada, Vivada, and then comes the synthesis. Nobody is putting across his perspective so as to curb the other one, so as to counter the other one. No. I have my perspective, let me listen to your perspective. And after listening both the perspective, we try to find out where the truth is. Here what is happening today is that we've only, that is, in this one we say Vada, Vada, and then comes the Samvada. When we say Samvada, it's a kind of a, negotiation of two ideas meeting halfway through. No, that is not happening. What I am saying is right. You are all wrong. And what you are saying is, unacceptable. Pratipaksha, they say, You can't, that is a very unhealthy kind of a sentence. We need to realize that each individual has, he or she has their own worldview, their own needs. They are not maroons, they are not, so we need to know they have their flesh and blood, they have their own thinking. So instead of negotiating or instead of exchanging ideas, we are forcing the other to accept my idea. That is very dangerous.
Space for negotiation is. So should we want to ask question to Girish? Yeah, someone is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a mic.
Good evening, Mr. Girish. We come from the same city, and Girish started working with my first film as an associate director from Pune Film Institute. I have traveled through Kannada film and Kannada history and all. What the stories which you have done, I have seen about 6, 7, but mostly you have selected very small stories. Why didn't you select novels like Kanuru Heggadati or Malagalale Madumagalu or Gruhabanga or Ramayana, which were great classics of Kannada literature at the same time. So it was very big in volume and 200, 300 characters. Definitely it was at your proposal. People would have been produced it, but because you made it big in the third film like that. And number two, you said Japanese films have exaggerated acting. I have never seen any exaggerated acting in Japanese films, except Toshiro Mifune. That's also only in Seven Samurai. No? And the music and dance came to India because of the American musicals. People liked American musicals. They didn't know how to put it, but only chance was Bharatanatyam, Kathak or whatever they put it, like Shantaram and all, you know. So that, from that place, American musicals, we started putting dance, and it became a very big entertainment, like that. No? Thank you, Girish.
Well, there are three questions. I'll answer one by one. Why do I pick up short stories and not big novels? The novels that you have quoted are all 600, 800 pages, and innumerable number of characters and their interactions and things like that. The problem with film is always time bound, which is not the case with cinema, literature. You have to finish the film in 2 hours. So my kind of filmmaking, where I get into all kinds of intricacies, I find it very difficult. So I restrict myself to small stories, wherein I can go into all the characters, their mental makeup, their social situation, interplay of emotions and that. And that works well for me. That's one of the reasons I have not tried epic form at all in my film. That's the first reason. Second one, you said that you have not seen Japanese film where the acting is exaggerated. I don't think you have seen Japanese films then at all, because most of the Akira Kurosawa's films, wherein Mifune is there, not just Mifune, even this one, including Ikiru, has some kind of a acting which is not from the Western notion, within quotes, realistic. They are not realistic from the Western perspective. Similarly, our acting is not realistic from their perspective. But my question is, why can't a serious filmmaker use that in a very proper and yet make a sensible film, not following their American model at all? So Kurosawa didn't do it, Mizoguchi didn't do it, including Ozu didn't do it. You said only Seven Samurai. What about Rashomon? What about Ikiru? What about even a social film like High and Low, where again all these people act very with broad gestures and so that. In fact, this man, this American director who acted in Dreams, as Van Gogh, he came back and said, I found it very difficult because Kurosawa wanted me to use broad gestures and all that, and I find it very difficult. But then, after second day, I just followed whatever instructions given by this man. No. What about his acting performance? Forget about Mifune. What about that lady's acting? It's so dramatic, so exaggerated. This is not this realistic kind of acting at all. You don't see that kind of acting anywhere in the West, either in Europe or in the American films, not even Latin American films. So I don't agree with that Japanese don't use exaggerated action. They use in all these films. third point also, I don't agree with you that the music came to Indian films through American musicals. Not at all. It came to us from our own theatre, Parsi theatre, our own traditional Yakshagana and your other art forms, folk art forms. So we have used music accordingly. Yakshagana was not influenced by American musicals. Similarly, Jatra was not used by American musicals at all. But Hindi commercial films were influenced by Parsi theatres. You don't mistake this. Hindi commercial cinema were influenced by Parsi theatre, not from American this one. It's there in all books on Indian cinema. They say Parsi theatre. That is one of the reasons why most of early films in all languages are from based on theatre plays. Malayalam is an exception, but Kannada, at least first 10 years, all the major films that produced are all from theatre adaptations, because they had the music, they had the dance, they had the acting style. So that's also not correct. Your observation is not correct.
Hello, Girish, you are considered to be one of the iconic figures in Indian New World. If a film lover like me says, you are the discovery of FTIA and you invented film. For example, Gulabi Takis. It is a fisher village background. You come across the advent of color TV. So what is your personal experience in Karnataka, or it is based on the autobiographical touches of you? Another question is regarding your films are caste ridden. My question is whether in the era of digital democratization, casting, what is your take?
See, regarding Gulabita case, what happened, I made a film before that called Hasina. While I was shooting Hasina in the coastal Karnataka, I came across a lot of resistance and things like that. So I went on to understand, it was an attempt to understand why there is so much of opposition to certain community in the coastal Karnataka. And I consulted, I interacted with many people, social activists and things like that. And whatever I have understood, I have put it in the film. So that got a different kind of a political texture to the film. So my study of coastal Karnataka for about 3 years helped me understand that. That is for the first question. The second one is about caste. Pardon? Caste and casting. Well, cinema is one such art wherein resemble the character the artist will have to somewhere resemble the character. It inadvertently brings in this element. How do we overcome that? Is something which we need to ask this question very often. Shyam Benegal in his film Summer has dealt with this. But Mrinal Sen in Search of Famine has talked about this. But that is a major problem in all films. Because film is visual media, the verisimilitude of the actor to the role he is playing becomes very important. In that process, we have to cast certain people who resemble the character who belong to certain caste. That is not the choice of the filmmaker. That is the kind of a thing which is there in the society.
Hello. Good evening, Girish sir. My name is Gopala Krishna. I am from Bangalore. I have seen many of your movies and also I'm connected with Suresh Angali's Thanda. I am there. I am very, very happy and I am curious to know so many other directors and filmmakers get into controversies. Even though you are dealing all the 15 movies that you have made, have controversial subjects, inverted commas, within quotes. But you have managed to float over them and you are able to swim across. What is the difference between them and you yourself? I'm really appreciative of your coming out of all those controversies, in spite of controversial subjects, quote unquote.
Yeah. That is true. All my films talk about controversial subjects,
yes.
but they are not, doesn't lead us to any
Yes.
controversy
Yeah.
because
They
nobody,
die down.
because nobody watches my film. That is a simple fact.
Yeah. But you have got a very good name, sir.
See, nobody sees my films. Just imagine I have made 15 films. The last 7, 8 films are not even properly released.
Yeah. I'm a close follower of yours.
Thank you.
Yes. I'm connected with the Socialist Party right from 1970s.
Great. Very good.
From under Professor Nanjun Swami's influence.
Oh, very good.
Yes. Samajwadi Yojana Sabha and all of that. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hi, sir. I have 3 questions for you. The first question is, are women protected in film sets? Security issues faced by women in film sets. What measures are taken to protect women who work in film sets? As a director, what measures have you taken?
Well, none of my films have any such problems. None of my women character never any time face such questions. Because when we say films, it's not a domain of one person. There'll be about 50, 80, sometimes more than 100 people working in a unit. So even if somebody misbehaves, the entire unit gets the bad name, which cannot be avoided at all. And that is one of the reasons, But since I am making films in a small budget with a very small crew, I make it a point that, all such things do not happen on my sets. I don't know whether it answers your questions or not.
So my second question is, do you think that freedom of expression is becoming more and more limited in India, or is it the opposite?
It's, technologically, we are getting freedom of expression, but in terms of the social context, it's becoming more, it's getting curbed.
Sir, and my last question is, what is your opinion of the film Kashmir Files?
I'm yet to see it.
So you have not seen it?
No, I'm yet to see it because it's running to full pack, full house, and I want to watch it once that the tickets are available. Because when the film was released, I was not in Bangalore, and I was in a place conducting a workshop, so that kept me busy for quite some time. Then the festival, this one started. I am hopping from one festival to another. Once I go back, probably I will catch up with it.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
No, they were able to make films in America, like Gone with the Wind, which is 800 pages, and Tolstoy's War and Peace, somewhere nearing 900 pages. So they were able to make films. Now here, what I thought, only you had some funding problem or something.
No, no, I have never picked up such huge novels. When people came to me with the request to do Gruhabanga and turn it into a film, I said I will not touch it. But when they asked me, will you be able to do a serial on it? I said yes. And I did a serial on it, 75 episodes. 75 episodes, half an hour each is what? 30 hours of film. If you give me money to make a film on Manegalalli Madhumagalu of 30 hours long, I certainly do it. Yeah, 18, not 18 hours, overnight, full night play. It starts at 10 and ends at 6 in the morning. See, earlier when we were in the FTII, we were not shown many American films, classics. Secondly, those were the times, those were the days when American films were not subtitled. They thought, this is English, nobody will need it subtitled. So now, during a DVD era, you are getting subtitled American films. That's a simple reason why I didn't watch. I watched some of the films which didn't impress me much. Roman Holiday, I have seen it. See, between Roman Holiday and Bicycle Thieves, if you ask me to choose one, I'll choose Bicycle Thieves. Because the realism of Roman Holiday is still concocted. Realism of Bicycle Thieves is very, very down to earth.
Because they made 1,000 movies based on Roman Holiday, even until today.
Not 1,000 films.
I was saying about 200.
Not 1,000 films. Let us be correct on facts. Does it make it, what are you trying to say? That they have made 1,000 adaptations of Roman Holiday. Are you trying to say it's a great work? It has influence for, like that you see in India, there are about 10 adaptation of Devdas. Do you mean to say Devdas is the greatest novel in India? Definitely not.
I think, is there any more questions?
Yeah.
Perhaps. Thank you, Girish, finally.
Thank you very much. Yeah.